This is a story about a young couple whose lives came together around the attack on Pearl Harbor. Patty Riley was studying architectural drafting in her hometown, Seattle, Washington, when her sister Molly told her that she could get a high-paying job with the Navy at Pearl Harbor, drawing plans for Navy facilities. Molly would be her boss. Molly and her husband Ross invited Patty to live in the little guest cottage next to their home in Ia Heights on the hill above Pearl Harbor. Patty arrived in Honolulu aboard the ship Matsonia on June 11, 1941. Patty's good looks soon attracted the attention of a young Navy pilot, Pete Orant. He would invite her out by buzzing the house in a plane and dropping a note tied to a rock out of the bomb bay of his plane into the front yard. They talked about the war going on in Europe and how it looked likely that there would soon be war between the United States and Japan. These clippings are from Patty's collection of 1941 Honolulu newspapers.
My lovely island home.
Driving up the hill to Patty's place, Pete often saw a young Japanese man beside the road, looking into binoculars on a tripod at the harbor below. Could he be spying for Japan? It was hard to tell, since nearly 40% of Hawaii's population was Japanese or part Japanese. Many years later, after Pete died, it was discovered that the young man named Tadao Yoshikawa was indeed a Japanese spy. On December 5, 1941, Admiral Kimmel sent Pete's ship, the USS Lexington, out to sea to deliver some airplanes to Midway Island. The other two aircraft carriers, the Enterprise and the Saratoga, were out at sea on other errands. December 6, 1941, Yoshikawa made a telephone call from the Japanese consulate in Honolulu to inform the Japanese Navy that there were no barrage balloons to interfere with the Japanese attack planes, and that many battleships were in the harbor. This is one of the reasons that the Japanese were ultimately defeated. Their plan was to catch the aircraft carriers inside Pearl Harbor and destroy them. Naval warfare was changing. Aircraft carriers became crucial to U.S. success during World War II in the Pacific. December 7, 1941, started out like any other Sunday morning in Ia Heights. The coffee was perking, the hot cakes sizzling on the griddle, and there was some nice Hawaiian music playing on the radio in the kitchen. Little did the Kenny household realize that Japanese planes were listening to that radio signal to home in on the island of Oahu for their attack. "What's the matter with the radio?" asked Patty. "I don't know. There's a lot of static," said Ross. "Aren't Pete and the boys supposed to be coming in to do a bombing practice this morning?" "I don't know," said Patty, "but I think I hear them now. I'll go out front and check." "Holy moly, the harbor's on fire," yelled Patty. Everybody rushed to the front of the house. It wasn't Pete and the boys. Pete's squadron, Scouting 2, was 1,000 miles away. The static was bombs falling on Pearl Harbor, even as they spoke. Nobody knew that the Japanese fleet, including 6 aircraft carriers full of attack planes, was just 200 miles north of Kahuku, the hump at the north end of the island of Oahu. One group flew down Oahu's Central Valley toward Pearl Harbor. Others attacked military installations on the island. Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station, Bellows Field, Wheeler Field, Eva Marine Corps Air Station, and Hickam Field, next to the Honolulu Airport, and Pearl Harbor. Patty ran to get her Brownie camera. Molly ran outside. "They're Japanese," she shouted. "Japanese! I can see the red circles on their wings." Patty was on the front lawn, aiming her camera at the harbor. As she snapped this picture, she shouted, "Oh my gosh, they got the Arizona!" Ross heard a plane approaching. He looked up and saw a Japanese plane coming up the hill with its machine guns blazing fire as it shot bullets at anyone outside their house. It was coming straight for Patty. whose face was in the camera. Ross sprinted out and grabbed her. As he dragged her to safety, Patty protested, yelling that he had spoiled her picture. The plane flew over, spraying bullets where she had been standing. "I just saved your life," said Ross. Everyone was shaken and very frightened. They wondered what was going to happen next. Would the Japanese bomb their neighborhood? Worse yet, would the Japanese invade Hawaii? Meanwhile, Ross's parents, Nell and Joe Kenny, were driving up IA Heights Drive for their usual Sunday visit. They saw some smoke from the harbor, but like most people in Honolulu, they did not know what was going on. A Japanese plane flew overhead, leaving a row of bullet holes in the hood of Joe and Nell's car. The engine was destroyed, and they had to walk the rest of the way up the hill. Other drivers were not so lucky. Molly and Patty wondered if they should hide in case there was an invasion. They checked out hiding places in a nearby sugarcane field. They came upon a Japanese woman with a knife in her belt and decided it would be much more comfortable to hide at home. Soon the Japanese planes were gone, but there was still chaos at Pearl Harbor. Ships had rolled over in the water, and men were trapped inside of them. Injured and burned men were swimming across the harbor. Some of them actually were swimming through fire. Patty and Molly went to the base hospital to see if they could help out. The nurses were exhausted. Molly and Patty were put to work sponging engine oil off the burned bodies of some surviving sailors. On their way home, they saw a downed Japanese plane, and they took home a souvenir. Monday morning, December 8, 1941, the United States declared war on Japan. Patty knew that Pete would now have to go to war. Had the Japanese prepared to invade the Hawaiian Islands? The people on Oahu knew that the Japanese could take the islands easily. Many rumors were circulating. Some appeared in the newspapers. Everyone was tense, not knowing what to expect next. Pete flew into Pearl Harbor and managed to land on Ford Island. He called Patty to come over to Ford Island, under the wing of a bombed plane. He told her, "This is war," and he asked her to marry him. 20 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, they were married at St. Clement's Church in Honolulu. The next day, Pete flew off to war. The Navy took them many places over the next 27 years. Among them, California, Virginia, Rhode Island, the White House, and India on their way around the world. In 1969, Pete was ordered back to Ford Island. The superstructure of the Arizona had been cut off at the waterline and had a white memorial built across its midsection. They saw the Arizona Memorial every night was a house built in about 1910 that had a basement with a machine gun emplacement and a concrete magazine for ammunition. Pete enjoyed sailing his catamaran in the harbor, but he had to clean the oil that is still leaking from the Arizona off the hulls. They entertained guests from navies from all over the world. Pete and Patty retired from the Navy. They found a nice home on Oahu, where they could see the Navy ships and planes go by. On December 7, 1972, Pete gave a speech to the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. The association made Pete its only honorary member. The speech, entitled "Only Yesterday," was awarded the Freedom Foundation Medal. In the speech, he warned that, for the United States to keep its freedoms, it must always be ready to defend them. It must never let the dictators of the world think that it is weak and unwilling to fight for its freedoms, as it did before the attack on Pearl Harbor.